Yeah, so, I'd spent so many years researching behind a computer and sitting, through the troves of documents, but I ultimately always felt like I could do more. So I was given this opportunity to join a team of researchers getting boots on the ground in Colombia to actually investigate something, related to the phenomena. There's something about being placed in an area where it's steeped in the phenomena. You're surrounded by locals who, to them, this subject, UFOs, extraterrestrials, is a part of everyday life. And to go into that world, coming from England where I live, was life-changing. It was phenomenal. So we were in Colombia to investigate a mysterious light phenomena for a couple of weeks, speak to and interview a lot of the indigenous locals about what had been witnessed over the years. But on this one specific day, I remember I was sat in a car with one of my colleagues. We were driving through this valley in rural Colombia, and I felt something different that day. And I even said to him, something feels different. So we were staying in this house, and it's sort of in the center of this valley surrounded by these two mountain peaks. And this mysterious light phenomena has said to appear on these mountain peaks for years. And so we're in a really good position to kind of observe. So we get back to the house, we pull up, we're kind of sat around talking, chilling out, and I hear, Vinny, a really loud, enthusiastic shout. So I run out the front of the house onto this, it's just like a wooden decking platform on the front of the house, right in front of the mountain. And lo and behold, we look up and there is this strange, large, white, almost like a plasma effect, like orb on the top of this mountain peak. It's huge, it's prominent, it looks kind of alive. I'm absolutely dumbfounded, gobsmacked. I can't really believe what I'm seeing at the time. Like, am I really seeing this? Is it really anomalous? Like, my brain is trying everything in its power to kind of make sense of what I'm seeing. Goosebumps and the hairs raised on my arms. Because this is what we've been out investigating, talking to witnesses and locals about, not expecting to see it for ourselves because we know how elusive it is and it's rare. It lasted for about an hour and a half as well. I don't know if anything changed from that sighting. I think what it did was it made me learn about myself. It made me learn that not knowing what I saw, I didn't jump to a conclusion like, oh, that's definitely this. It's definitely anomalous and it's not from this earth. I surprised myself in my skepticism or my skeptical reaction that I was trying to break it down analytically and scientifically in my own mind, let's say, to make it make sense. And I can tell you now, 2+ years later, I'm still no closer to understanding it, making sense of it. And I think what I've done is I've just come to terms with, look, you've seen something, it was strange, it can't be explained. But ultimately, maybe I don't need the answer. So a lot of the locals would say that the lights represent UFOs, but then when you asked them a little bit more, they would talk about spirits of the ancestors revisiting. And there are some who think these UFOs are coming through a portal on the mountain face. They nickname it the door of the gods, but it's just normal. There's no stigma or any taboo surrounding the conversations that they have. They take it deadly serious, down to the local police. We ask them if they've seen the lights on the mountain. They say, the lights? You mean the UFOs?
What is real and what is not? Welcome to Contact Confidential, where we explore the lines between reality and our stories. Hi, my name is Jerry. I'm a psychotherapist and producer of documentary-style podcasts that explore the magic and mystery of being human. On my show, Dragon's Bread, I explore contact stories, which include stories of believed encounters with UFOs and extraterrestrials. On this show, I talk to past guests as well as influential people about contact, and we explore the lines between where a story starts and reality begins. We will look at why our evidence for life beyond our planet isn't adding up, and explore the changes we may have to make to get a better understanding of what's really going on. So get comfortable, open your mind, and prepare to let go of your beliefs and assumptions, because you are now being read into Contact Confidential. All right, Vinnie Adams, welcome to Contact Confidential.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I had the privilege of being on your show, and you were kind enough to come and join me on my show. So thank you for being willing to do that. I appreciate it.
Oh man, it was a really great conversation that when you joined me on my show, and yeah, now the roles are reversed. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can get into.
Your show has become kind of a pit stop for many of the leading figures in disclosure. I'm curious about what inspired you to get behind the mic.
Whoa, that is a big one. Yeah. It's funny because I always say to people I was never meant to be in front of a camera, behind a microphone. I was always a researcher of this enigmatic UFO subject. But I had a few friends push me and say, you should really give these things a go. And you never know, you might enjoy it. And lo and behold, I was sort of begrudgingly decided to start a show. And literally from day one, I was just go, 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 and really into it, really enjoying it, very aware that I was an absolute amateur and didn't really know what I was doing. But I figured, I'm having some really interesting conversations around a subject that I'm passionate about. And I just so happen to be putting those conversations out on the internet, and people can take it how they want. And if they get something from it, great. If not, no damage done. And so that's kind of how that sort of kicked off. And here I am over 3 years later now. It's just a huge part of my life, and I love it.
Where did you start pulling the thread on these questions? How old were you, and where did that start to show up?
Yeah, it's quite a generic story, I think, like a lot of people. I'm in my mid-40s, and I was born at the end of the 70s, and around the end of the 70s, the early 80s, we were inundated with a plethora of really good science fiction movies, and I was just hooked on anything that involves space. I started with the Star Wars and things like that, into E.T. and Close Encounters, and so from a very young age, I was just baffled by this vast space out there and what could be out there. So that really sparked my initial interest. But it wasn't until I was in my sort of 20s where I started looking at a lot of fringe topics, not just UFOs. I was just trying to expand my knowledge and curiosity about the world that we live in and life around us. And so I was just absorbing books and documentaries, and that then led into the UFO subject, where I discovered a lot of countries had released archives of what were classified documents and now unclassified. And I would spend whole nights sat in front of my computer just trying to work through these really, really bizarre documents, thinking in my head that I may be able to find some puzzle piece and put it all together. And, I've got the answer kind of thing, but I couldn't have been more wrong. But what I did realize is that I had a passion for kind of the strange mysteries of the UFO subject and how it is related to the government or the military and things like that. A lot of credible people, not just, people in the back end towns of Texas or something strange like that, seeing these things. And so, I spent a good decade just looking at documents and building up my knowledge of UFO cases as well, not just the big popular ones like Roswell, but, other ones as well. Which led right up to when I joined, let's say, the UFO community. It was the dark times of the pandemic where we were all stuck indoors a lot of the time. And I just wanted to put some information out online for myself more than anything to look back on. So I started an Instagram account, and man, that just took off like a rocket. And, I was just sort of thrust into the community, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this 100%. And like I said, here I am 3-4 years later, and it's taken over my life.
I'm curious about why this question is so powerful for you. as somebody that's done a number of interviews with people that have had experiences, that's particularly the angle that I'm working from, is experiencers and contactees. I know a lot of those people find themselves moving towards media to have an outlet for an expression, and that which becomes useful to them, feeling part of. But I'm curious for you, because yours sounds like genuine curiosity that inspired action, which was research. Do you have insight into why the question is so powerful for you?
That's a really good question. I've never really thought about it like that. In these few years that I've been doing this, I almost feel like I've never taken the time to stop and ask myself those kind of questions. But I think it comes down to that need for answers that, with everything I do in life, I always like to see it through to the end, no matter what. And so I feel like this is no different. I want to see it through to the end. And now, do I want those answers for myself? Sure. Do I want them for other people out there, experiences? Absolutely. But I think a real big motivator for me is I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I think that if all of this is true, then the potential for a better world, a better planet for people like my daughter to grow up in is kind of that, probably now, that overarching motivation for me, I think.
And I want to make sure I'm understanding that. Your daughter's a motivation. Do you feel she's stepping into a world where there just isn't clarity about an issue that it has serious importance to humanity? You feel like you're plugging a hole here, that there's just not enough clarity, and you want to inspire clarity?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, look, if we have the potential to create these energy sources for the betterment of humanity, if they exist and we have this technology, then it can be used to really help people in this world. And I think that's a pretty great motivator, I think, for anything, is to bring forward a better epoch, let's say, for potentially just growing as a species, and giving my daughter that opportunity to be in a part of that world. That's all I need, really, is because it's not the greatest place at the moment on this planet. There's a lot of negativity, a lot of war and things like that. So, and I'm looking at it from such a big picture, and I'm not saying I'm going to be the one to change the world. That's not what I'm getting at. It's more like, if I can be a small cog in a huge machine that actually in some way helps us get there eventually for the benefit of our children and our children's children in the future, then I'm happy to just play that small part.
Well, let's look at the big machine and the general state of ufology and the posture of the public right now in terms of what is known and what is unknown. So let's imagine the U.S. and world governments are capable of communicating the truth of UAPs and the ET reality. Do you think the public is capable of hearing it? It seems that we're easily confused in this era of media saturation by conspiratorial narratives. Are we even capable of telling the truth from lies at this point, do you think?
It's a great question. I think it's definitely not an easy position to be put in if this were to all come out, let's say, with an official announcement, let's say, by the government. But I think the human race we're a tough species. We get through things. And I think if we were to sort of wait for the time to be right to get this information out, then I think we'll be waiting forever. I think we just have to get the information out there, vet it, verify it. And once we can conclude that it is indeed legitimate, then we can begin that new journey into creating that new world. And it's by all means not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of time. But I think the quicker it happens, the quicker we'll get to that kind of final place to start being better. I mean, it sounds easy when I say it like that, but I think when you break it down, that's how it looks in its rawest form for progression.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of just the practicality of introducing the public to information is readiness. And I think we find ourselves in an era where people have such access to information that it's easy to be confused. There's cautiousness and carefulness about whether or not our information sources are trusted. How do we move towards an era of trust, do you think? I'm just looking at what it looks like in terms of the communication process around this issue. We're marching out whistleblowers and former defense intelligence agents and people that have worked for the government for a long period of time. And the public is faced with parsing through information from people that have been connected to the source of the problem. Secrecy in terms of a legacy program has already been confirmed by people like Luis Elizondo. The question of whether or not the public can actually process the information is a whole nother issue, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's going to be very different for everyone on an individual level. And I would never say to anyone, just because we may get this new information from the government, that it cancels out all of the lies and the cover-ups maybe that have been going on for decades. So I'm not asking people to just blindly trust the government all of a sudden, but I think with the release of this kind of information, it gives people the chance to then decide for themselves if they want to go off and look into how they can feel more comfortable with that information by doing research, by speaking to people who may be in the know a bit more than them. And I think each individual would have to kind of find their own way of dealing with it. Some will just deal with it instantly, like, yeah, no, I kind of guessed it anyway, carry on. Others might be a little bit more troubled by it. But I think inevitably, I think it needs to happen. Just so we can get over that big first hurdle,
Yeah, and it seems like this first era of disclosure is really about subjecting the public to information. And it seems to be that if you look at the meta pattern here, is we're marching out people that have some level of credibility, and that is people that have been associated with the military and the government, despite the contradiction of the government, having withheld information for a long period of time. These are the people that we're relying on. So it's informational. And there's a disparity in the media right now in terms of how much is being communicated to the public in terms of pure information, and how much the mainstream public is hearing from people that have actually had the experiences themselves. How do you make sense of that gap between what the public is being fed, information versus stories from actual experiencers? Why do you think there's so much resistance in the mainstream media to hearing from experiencers?
I think to some degree there is a little bit of, we've seen this before. It's almost like it bears some resemblance to patterns that we've gone through before in this subject, and it ultimately led to nothing. So there is caution on that side of things when reporting on this subject. And of course, the stigma and taboo surrounding this topic has been, let's say, vibrant for many years. It's followed us everywhere. And now that we sort of seem to be breaking that down a little bit, I think it has to be done correctly. We kind of almost only have one chance to get it right. Otherwise, we'll be back to square one again. We've had some really high-profile individuals come forward with, claims, stories that cannot ultimately be verified in the public domain. And I think the way I look at it is I think it's time to stop vilifying the government as a whole. The government is a huge organization made up of millions of employees, and it's very easy to just use that umbrella term, the government, to, in respect to this. Don't trust the government. The government knows this. Where in fact, the government's made up of a lot of incredible individuals who are honest and trustworthy and are serving the public's interest. So I think when we have a very small group of individuals who may be the reason for the cover-up and the secrecy surrounding the UFO subject, we shouldn't just lump everyone together with those individuals. And so that's always at the forefront of my mind when I think about this subject. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, I think you're really circling back to to a core issue when it comes to communicating very difficult information to process, which is lost respect and lost trust. We don't understand, I think, behind the actions of the government, why they chose secrecy, and I think there's the public is being asked to trust the government, it takes a certain amount of faith in the government. And I think a lot of ex-military people and people that have been associated with the government generally understands that there's just good people in government. It's, it's really easy for the civilian population to personify and villainize people. There's likely reasons behind what they've done, but nonetheless, it's impacted the public's ability to trust. And whether or not we can create a space where we can heal that gap is really kind of the question behind ufology, that it's led to a huge schism. And one of the schisms that I see and that I produce around is that schism, like who's hearing from contactees and experiencers. Not a lot of people, and it's moved towards science to validate it. And personally, I feel that is the right direction to go. We really need to understand what the phenomena is before we understand the effects. However, I think experiencers are a huge piece of the puzzle. And until we really get a scope of the range of experiencers that come as a result of contact, we can't really put a fine point on what contact is all about. It's not just about the nuts and bolts encounter. It's about what happens to people on the other side of these encounters. And that's something the public is really reluctant to hear about. So I want to speak to that schism a little bit. So we're kind of getting into the weeds of ufology. So what do you make of the disparity in the narratives between people that may have just witnessed versus experienced contact? For instance, one camp is trying to validate just the truth of UAPs and ETs are real. They're focused on just the facts. They're out there. And then at the other far end of the other spectrum, you got people that are arguing for the existence of a secret space program and a galactic federation that's policing the galaxy. Like, what do you make of that distance between the two narratives?
That's a really tough question. I think like in any subject, you get people that almost want to believe certain things because they sound good. They sound interesting. I mean, I'd love there to be a galactic federation out there with a secret space program policing the galaxy. I think it's the stuff of sci-fi movies. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I think it's the evidence. That's what we need. That's what we thrive on. That's how we're able to kind of move any subject forward. And so it's difficult because you obviously have individuals who claim to have been part of these programs, whether it be secret space programs out there on Mars, giving testimony. And we also have experiencers on the other end giving their testimony. So who do we believe? Who do we take seriously? And I think that in itself has been one of the core issues for many years with this subject. But these voices need to be heard. And, it was never going to be easy just to take something at face value. But testimony is, I think, one of the most important pieces of evidence that you can get. And it's how you then take that testimony and evidence and kind of work with it, add more evidence to it, go and search for more things that can corroborate. And again, it's probably one of the most difficult things in the subject is to kind of gather multiple data points of evidence because it's lacking. There's just not much out there. But, at the moment, the experiencer needs to have their voice heard. I think the focus has been shifted away from them for too long now, and they've been pushed to the back, and that's not a good thing.
You're speaking to the schism, and the schism says until we can validate and have proof, we need to exercise a certain amount of skepticism about the stories that experiencers are bringing. So the question is, what do we do with those stories? So now the experiencer narrative is being expanded upon a little bit more. You get people like Gary Nolan that are coming forward and acknowledging past experiences and childhood experiences. You got whistleblowers like Jason Sands, who's being featured in James Fox's new documentary that's coming up, that in his initial Twitter spaces, he was acknowledging that he was part of a secret space program, which everybody was kind of like, what the fuck? What do you do with something like that? Do you just immediately disqualify him? How do you file those alternative narratives that are coming out along with genuine contact experiences. Is this a psychological phenomena? Is that the way that we get around this? Or is this an aberration, a reflection of some sort of personality disorder? But the question is, like, what do you do with that stuff? Is it harming ufology?
It can do, certainly, but I think every voice needs to be heard. There is, the way I think of it and the way I come at it personally is I'm not one to judge. That's not my place to do that. It's not my place to believe either, but it's my place to be respectful. And if I speak to an experiencer and, you know, they maybe come across convincing and that they're convinced that this thing happens, I have to respect that. I believe that they experienced what they experienced. And, you know, with a lot of things like this, I have this big invisible proverbial table in front of me, and I kind of leave things on it until they can be taken off 100%, whether proven 100% or, you know, I can prove that they're not true 100%. But until that happens, I leave everything on the table. I have my invisible system of, well, this is more plausible than this. And so, you know, my table has some organizational structure to it, but it's all kind of in my mind. And so I learned that just because you might not like the sound of something, or it sounds too far out there, or it goes against something I may believe in another area, that I can't just throw it away or ignore it because it doesn't fit in a certain little comfortable narrative that I've kind of built up for myself around this subject. And so I'm still learning on how to deal with a lot of this information and a lot of these witnesses and testimony and things. But I think as long as I do it in a respectful way, that I think I'll come through it and find more ways to deal with it and understand what to do with some of this information.
I think that's that's a solid approach, and there still exists the problem within ufology of like how we make sense of what is happening around this subject. And I think at the core of it is, you know, you usually hear with people that are on the other end of that experiencer schism where they move into, like, let's just say an alternative narrative, like the whole cosmology of the star seeds and things like that, that you have to find a way to qualify it, what is happening with the people. And the question is still as how much of what we're seeing in terms of what their perspective is on the other side of contact experiences, how much of that is an effect of the actual contact experience itself. So we have a genuine mystery there. And I think, you know, finding a way to create space for those narratives is important because there's obviously something to learn there. We need more science, clearly, to understand what the effects are, but this seems to be an effect. Right? How a person's psychology is influences and impacted. Genuinely, what you see is the way that they view themselves, the world, and others, and the universe changes dramatically after a contact experience. Right now, we're not dealing with it. We're relegating them to the fringes of, you know, of YouTube and podcasts. And I think that's just another element of this whole very confusing topic that we're going to have to figure out how to grasp. We need more psychologists involved in this, I think.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. I think, we have to, science is valuable, and that science of the broad spectrum of science, I think that will really help this subject. We've been crying out for it for so long, and I think it's starting to happen. So it's exciting times. Yeah,
we need greater minds and greater methods. So let me switch gears on you. So Luis Elizondo dropped his book Imminent, reinforcing the claim UAPs are real. We are not alone. We've recovered craft and ETs, and the government's got a long-running legacy UAP program. Now we have former senior UAP task official Jay Stratton coming out with a book. Who knows if it's going to be a tell-all book. What do you think is left of the story to be broken?
That's a tough question. Nothing would surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if there was so much more to this story yet to be revealed. It wouldn't. But at the same time, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it is just as simple as that we have these craft. We've had them for a while. We have had a great effort in trying to reverse engineer engineer them for our benefit. Now, whether that is a benefit for the military and weaponizing this technology to kind of get a one-up and on other adversarial things, I don't know. Man, I don't know. This subject always surprises me. You know, you think that you've got the base story and you're working it and trying to piece it together, but then more information will come out of left field and throw a curveball, and you just, it's forever evolving, this subject. And so I don't know. I take each day as it comes. I take each interview and each conversation I have as it comes, and I just hope that I can piece all of it into something that to me makes sense and that it feels like we're heading in the right direction. But it's a minefield. And so I don't really know how to answer that question without kind of sounding vague.
Well, I opened the door for you to really expand upon what you would hope to hear. And I think that's a good, honest answer. I'm not sure.
I think, we've had a couple of whistleblowers coming forward, and I think what I would hope is that it does have a snowball effect and a knock-on effect where we will get more and more people who have been involved in these legacy programs coming forward. That's the ultimate goal, is just to add more credible witnesses to then eventually, hopefully, get some credible data or evidence. Finally, that would be the kind of timeline that I would like. But of course, I think that's just naive to think that it would be that smooth.
What more data are we really seeking? I mean, Luis Elizondo came out, and as far as what what the public could ask for in terms of an official with the purview and oversight to actually know what was going on, he came out and said all the things. We have a legacy UFO program. What's more left? Do you think the public is simply in a position where they're waiting for the UFO to land on the White House lawn and shake hands with the president?
Well, I think, in the last couple of years with people like David Grush, the kind of the number one whistleblower that everyone talks about, I think what people would like to see is that if what he says is true and we've got the craft and the bodies, let's see these craft and bodies. Let's see evidence of them in a document. All we've had to go on for the last 7 years are the three kind of gun camera videos, the FLIR one, the Go Fast, and the Gimbal. And we're led to believe that the government is in possession of a lot higher quality videos and things with data like radar tracks to back it up. So, we've got the testimony, but let's see the videos and let's see the data so that we have multiple things to look at around one incident. And then it's almost, there's your proof kind of thing. I think that's what people would like to see. And of course, landing on the White House lawn would be great.
It would be great, wouldn't it? I'm personally voting for that one. That one more lines up to a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Luis Elizondo's deepened the waters a little bit by acknowledging that what he had seen is hundreds, if not thousands, of high quality videos of actual footage. And he said that on a couple other podcasts. What do you think this says about what the hell the government is doing at this particular point in time? In one sense, there's this effort to allow former military to step forward through the DOPSR process. They're approving what they say, and they say, go ahead and go and do it. And then in another instance, they're withholding information. What do you make of this feet in two worlds phenomena that you're seeing from the government right now?
It's a mess. It's really messy. And, I'm lucky enough to have conversations with many people such as Lou Elizondo and others. And it seems to be that there is this internal battle within the DOD. Some people want this out, some people don't. And what we're seeing by having individuals step forward through the DOPSR process and then not having kind of these high definition videos released, I almost feel like we can see that battle happening. They're very quick to release images or video of Russian aircraft getting too close to sensitive airspace, and they release them videos, but they can't release these UAP videos. There's no excuse as to why they can't scrub any information that may reveal sources and methods. And so the government aren't helping themselves by not releasing this. It's just adding to the mystique, I think, of the subject. And so whatever the narrative is being played out right now, I think it's calculated to a degree. It almost seems that way, this slow drip of disclosure that could be for good reason. It could be that it's just a mess.
What would be the good reason to do that, to manipulate the public, to release a Tic Tac video and hold on to 4K videos of actual craft in the sky? How do you make sense of the mind that says, I'll say one thing and do another?
It's really difficult. There could be so many reasons. It could be for, to keep an advantage over adversaries, to say, hey, look, we don't want the adversaries to know that we've got this technology, that we're working with this technology. They may not want to scare the public, although I find that one a little bit hard to believe because...
Too late.
Yeah.
They already did that.
Exactly.
Anybody who's paying attention that has the space to be afraid right now, anybody who's paying attention.
I think it's an amalgamation of all these things collectively. A little, it could affect one person in a certain way, and the government have just got a hold on it. But I think that they're losing their grip on it, to be honest. So almost now, I think some of the things that we see are just a last grasp effort to hold on to this core secret. And I think it's time that we realize that that's not going to happen. The toothpaste is out of the proverbial tube and it's not getting put back in. And I'm quite a positive person, and so I'll always keep going with this subject, even if we get knockbacks all the time. But I think we're heading in the right direction.
Do you think what we're seeing in terms of this split, in terms of what the public is allowed to see and then what is being withheld, could have to do with politics?
Yeah, I think this is a game that's been played, for some time now. I think it's definitely political to some degree. This subject's been weaponized, and I don't mean in a technological way. I just mean in a way that it can be used to manipulate and to control ultimately as well. Ultimate control over not only the public but also the powers and other powers, superpowers in this world. I think it's just a game that's been played, and I think it's a game that they're now losing. Like I said, I think that it's slipping out of the hands of the people that had ultimate control. And I'll be interested to see how it progresses.
Well, I think in terms of what we see, like in terms of this issue, is we see two political parties that are willing to kind of come across the aisles to speak to it. But when it really comes to who gets to frame the issue, there could potentially be some struggle. And this is, and by no ways do I think that I'm right on this. However, I'm just seeing what's unfolding within the political sphere. You have one party that's aligned with perhaps the more progressive view of let's allow science to lead the way. And then you have another political party that's continuing to evolve to become more aligned with the Christian right. There's two very different mindsets in terms of how they might view the phenomena. And those people are actually the people that are running the government right now. And that's a very real schism in the government. Perhaps this is complicated disclosure to some degree.
I think the way you framed it there is probably some of the reasons why it's been held back for so long, because there are different factions thinking and believing different things. I think now in the last year or two, I think it's been very interesting to see the bipartisanship on this matter. And I think that's been somewhat of a relief to see that people who would be very on opposing sides on almost every issue have actually come together because they realize the importance of this information, and that, hang about, if this is real, then let's put other things aside and really try and sort of get that out. I think that's really encouraging to see.
So there's a schism in ufology between the nuts and bolts camps and the consciousness camps. So you can even see this divide reflected in the government with OSAP and ATIP, as one was focused on the relationship between the paranormal and UAP, and while the other was strictly focused on identifying threats in the sky. Where do you think the future of UAP studies is headed?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think, again, more academia and science on board is ultimately where this is going to help progress. But I think pulling the two areas that you mentioned there, the nuts and bolts and the kind of consciousness side of things, I think pulling them together, I think will reveal more. I think they're so intertwined and interlocked more so than a lot of people may realize. Certainly a lot more than I originally realized. I kind of come from that nuts and bolts camp and tried to avoid for a while the other side of things. I thought, well, I don't need to go there. Other people are looking at that. I can just focus on this one area. But, I soon realized that these things are so intertwined that you can't avoid one. You have to take them both. And so that's forced me to kind of really learn and listen about the consciousness side of things, because it's so far from my wheelhouse that I almost feel like I'm a new student to that side of the phenomena. And I think that's kind of exciting at the same time, that I'm still able to put myself in a position to really learn. And that's how I go through this subject, as a student of it, not necessarily as someone who knows anything or is above anybody else who has an interest in this subject. It's purely, I'm in a good position, and I'm going to honor that position by just really learning and doing the best I can with that.
What do you think changes when not some disclosure happens, but 100% disclosure happens? Meaning when the president drops the bomb that ETs are real. What do you think changes?
I think there'll be some big changes. There'll be small changes, but I think the world, the post-disclosure world, I don't think we'll see it in its true form for quite a number of years, if not decades. By the time the dust has settled and economies have settled and things like that, I think it's going to be such a long process to finally work out what the world looks like with this knowledge. I think is just something that'll take a long time. I don't see any instant change. It's not like we're going to suddenly be flying around in anti-gravitic cars or anything in the years following, or even have the answers to kind of some of the third world issues that could benefit from this technology. So I think initially we'll see a bit of chaos in certain areas, a bit of a struggle, but ultimately I think when the dust settles, it'll be a better world. And again, it'll be more for my kids and grandkids and things like that. I don't know if I'll be around to see that final iteration of the planet.
Where's the tension in disclosure? Where do you think society is going to struggle?
I think there'll be people who'll hear the news and just poo-poo it and just be like, yeah, doesn't surprise me. And then they go on to work that day like nothing happened. But I think there'll be certain areas of society where it'll be life-changing. Their whole worldview will be flipped upside down on its head, and some people are going to struggle. And I think we need to be prepared for that as well. I think having structures in place where disclosure happens, and then suddenly we need to be able to reassure people and walk them through the process afterwards. In an ideal world, that would be the way. It's hard to say. I think there'll just be pockets of communities around the world who struggle and others who don't. It's so hard to predict and speculate on things like that on such a big scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just getting in there and tangling with you just a little bit because I'm hearing a little bit of aversion to the idea that disclosure can happen quickly. You're painting a portrait of a society that's going to take time to process. What exactly are they processing, do you think?
It's not so much the processing it. It's more about the implementation of what comes with disclosure. Does disclosure come with the technology as well, the release of the technology? There's that way. That's how I look at it. Do we suddenly get, okay, yes, we're not alone and we've got the technology. Here it is. It's going to benefit you doing this. Is that what we get, or do we just get this knowledge and that's it? You see, there's so many ways to look at it. And so I that's what I struggle with.
Well, that's not even speaking to the ET portion. What if an ET steps out?
There you go. Again, another option.
What does that change?
Yeah. I think that'll be really difficult for a lot of people, and probably myself included. It's tough. I try not to think about how other people will react because I don't know, but I know how I'll react. I'd be quite unnerved to see an extraterrestrial, whether it's presented alongside an official, government individual. Hey, this is so and so from so and so place. I'd be nervous. I'd be scared. I'd be like, we've all seen so many movies where extraterrestrials are not good. And I think that will seep through into reality that, well, we've been made to believe that they're not necessarily always good. So could this just be a smokescreen for something to come in the future? And I think that'll be quite a prominent thought process from a lot of people.
Vinnie Adams, thank you for sharing your time today on Contact Confidential. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Jerry. It's been great.
Big thanks to Vinnie Adams for being on the show today. You can keep up with Vinnie at his YouTube page at Real Disclosure Team, and you can search his Instagram page at disclosure_team. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming guests, I'd suggest heading on over to the Patreon page at patreon.com/2yards. All right, thanks again for listening. Stay true in the meantime, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Dragon's Bread or Contact Confidential.